Hi, Josh. Thank you
Hi,
for joining
Nathan.
us again. And thank you for your political insights into the current state of play of as business and government wrestles with Brexit and COVID.
I
Um,
think last time we spoke properly, one to one anyway, was on your balcony at your offices before the pandemic. So yeah,
it was, yes, it was. Yeah, happier times perhaps, but let's look forward and perhaps just starting with Brexit and just wondering, beneath the bluster and the rhetoric and the political manoeuvring, do you feel government really understands the negative impact economically for business and more widely for us as individuals that could result from a no-deal Brexit?
well, I mean, I think it's very mixed in lots of ways. And we know how complicated it is. So look, there's undoubtedly a bit of a narrative that says, with a skinny deal on the table, how different is that really from no deal? With all the hassle of trying to get it, isn't it better just to accept no deal and move on and stop all the debate? I think we have been utterly clear that simply isn't the case for so many firms up and down the country.
Yeah,
We did a big piece a couple of weeks ago with 71 trade associations, so 71 sectors of the economy, all saying a deal still is absolutely fundamental if we're to have a foundation for recovery post-COVID. And there are so many reasons for that. There are almost sort of three buckets of reasons. One is the immediate reason. If that deal, as it should, is tariff and quota free for manufacturers, for anyone dealing in goods, that is so important, and that makes an absolutely immediate difference. Now, for services, obviously, the deal itself may not have that much more in it, but that's the second bucket. What it does is there's a range of stuff outside of the FTA that is actually, in many ways, pretty close to being ready to go in the days after a deal is agreed. So whether that's data, whether that's a trade deal with Turkey and other rollovers, whether it's starting to look at equivalence of qualifications or intercompany transfers, all of that can follow if
yeah,
we get a deal. And then the third reason it's so important, and long term, actually, this may be the most important reason, is that if you're in no deal, we know what the relationship between the EU and the UK is going to be like. It's going to be a blame game. If you've got a deal, you've got a relationship intact, and you can start those critical conversations about how you build on that, how you put in place easements for what is still going to be a bumpy January, a
mm,
bumpy February, how you work together to make sure you're supporting all of your economies over that time. So absolutely no question how important it is. Do they get it? Well, look, I'm talking weekly to Michael Gove. Last week, we brought together a group of advanced manufacturers. Yesterday, it was food and drink, being very, very honest and blunt about the challenges and the preparations needed. So I think, yes, he is hearing. I think the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, understands it. Alok does. And they're being good champions for it. But we know that in many ways, the problems that remain are political. On the
yeah,
EU, it's country management, it's single market protection. In the UK, it's party management, it's the communication about sovereignty. And I think we are at the stage in the negotiations now where it's political decisions that get us over the line, not negotiating decisions. And that is what is really needed. And the final thing I'll say is, whilst I still feel we will get a deal, speed really matters. Preparation is so hard for so many firms. For some, it's because resilience has been stripped bare by COVID. For others, it's because actually there are too many unanswered questions, and we won't get answers to those questions until the deal and the text is clear. And if that doesn't happen, there's a lot of talk now about last possible date for agreement. That's no good. We need to be thinking first possible date. So that we get that clarity, we can put in place answer the questions that currently can't be answered, get those easements that I've discussed, and move forward as effectively as possible. Because there are 40 days left. That goes in the blink of an eye. So I think the understanding is as strong as it has ever been. Business deserves huge credit for feeding the insight in. I think it's highly likely that if business hadn't done that, we would be slipping more into that no deal territory. But it's absolutely crunch time right now, so we're doing all we can to get it over the line.
great. Well, thank you for your hard work on that, and let's hope your optimism is well founded. If we look ahead to life after that deal, and and as things become more positive in relation to COVID with vaccines, in sight, There is I suppose, a little cloud of the significant pile of debt that's racking up as we rightly support business and individuals and public services through COVID. Not yet clear how the country will foot the bill for that, and we obviously have heard today Rishi Sunak suggesting a public sector pay freeze. Do you think we are in for a return to austerity, or will the government take more of a investment for growth approach, do you think?
I think, firstly, I don't think the detail hasn't been worked out. I think it's really important when you're faced with this level of challenge that actually you have a clear philosophy about how to handle that debt. It feels from the conversations we've had that the philosophy will be different from, let's say, post-financial crisis. I think for a couple of reasons. One is straightforward reasons like lower interest rates. It's easier, it's cheaper to carry debt. The second is almost more philosophical, more personal. I think there's a feeling that we're all in this together. This was nobody's fault. This was, a dreadful natural occurrence, and therefore around the world, the view of how you live with debt might be slightly different. But I think it is important to work that philosophy out, because if you don't know how you're going to handle the debt, you don't know how much you're going to repay and when. So it's hard to know how much you can spend here. So a bit more work needed there. But the underpinning views that we're picking up, one is, I don't think there's a massive appetite for austerity. That doesn't mean that belts won't need to be tightened in some way. But I don't think we should expect something similar to the sort of George Osborne approach post-financial crisis. I think there is much more of a belief, and this is the line that we have been using relentlessly. Whatever debt we face, whatever decision we make about repaying that, it's going to be easier if the economy is growing.
Yeah.
And so right now, that must be the absolute priority. We've seen, to their credit, the government come out with a lot of investment in terms of, the build. So we need to see that coming through, but that ambition is there. We've seen the 10-point carbon plan. We've seen investments in defence over the last few days. Excuse me. If we can capture that and use that to drive investment and drive ambition, then that will help us grow. There will, of course, be some conversations, and it will be one of the big debates, I suspect, in 2020, about how you do increase the tax revenue. Now, there you can have endless discussions about how you do that. We've seen conversations already about capital gains tax, for example, and I think the balance will be how do you increase the tax take whilst driving that growth and supporting businesses. In an already quite challenging environment, because already, of course, the tax system has to adapt to increased digitization in a structurally very, very different economy. So the risk will be that you pick off one tax intervention at a time, whereas actually having a more rounded approach about how it all fits together is important. Some of those key areas like business rates, which are absolutely out of date, don't work for our economy, do not incentivize green investment, for example. A real opportunity to look at some of those problems that have actually been hobbling business for some time. Yes, in the light of how we manage debt, but actually more in the light of how do we build a modern, competitive, dynamic and progressive economy that is powered by enterprise and which helps all regions and all people to actually reach their goals and improve their prosperity. So a huge debate, very, very complicated, but I think probably we've got a little bit of time focusing on growth before we really get to the crunch.
Well, that's encouraging. And with that in mind, the National Industrial Strategy is due for a refresh in January. I sense that you think the government's got an appetite for investment to turbocharge that, to be the part of the catalyst for innovation. But you've talked just then about the sort of joining up of dots and the rounded picture. What role do you think business and CBI can help to make sure that there is that joined up thinking, both nationally, department to department, but then also regionally to help address this?
I think the business role is absolutely fundamental in that. One of the things, I've been at the site CBI for 5 years now, and one of the things that staggers me is how challenging it is to properly join stuff up across government. It's a conversation that we have all of the time. I mean, look, if we're honest, businesses face it too. How often do businesses talk about not working in silos and collaboration and things like that? It is exactly the same across government departments. And actually, organisations like the CBI and businesses very often are talking to more government departments at the same time than the departments themselves. So we find ourselves spending quite a lot of time actually sharing messages and encouraging people to come together, and we cannot do enough of that. There is an intention to refresh the industrial strategy in January. I was talking to Alok Sharma about it yesterday. And as I've said, we're already seeing signals of that now with the 10-point green plan, with investment in skills and other areas. I think we fundamentally believe it needs to happen, but it needs to learn the lessons from the last one. The last one, if we're honest, was sort of okay on paper, but pretty lukewarm in terms of delivery. And a lot of that was because there was never really that feeling that the whole of government bought into it. You know, there were always question marks about how much Treasury actually really committed. And if that's the case, if it's just a beige strategy, it doesn't really. Reasons to believe this is an ambitious government. When you remember when Boris, you know, became Prime Minister before COVID, the manifesto did, in their view, set out a vision for where they wanted to take the economy, particularly around levelling up, around green, and around investment in innovation. When the refreshed industrial strategy comes out, expect it to actually stick pretty closely to those manifesto commitments. Of course, the world's changed because of COVID, and of course we need to adapt to those. But those principles are the same thing. We're pushing the government very hard to look at what investment can follow that. How do you actually, firstly, set that, you know, that vision that fires the animal spirits, but actually back that up with action. And I think we will see some of that coming through. But of course, it's not just about government. Business do have to take a lead. Business don't need to just wait for government to set the agenda. There's so much that we can do, particularly around driving that investment in R&D. You know, 52% of investment in R&D across the UK is in the southeast, East London. How do we make sure in the southwest that actually we're catching up and overtaking? How do we make sure that we are adapting to the changes that COVID has wrought across the country, particularly around flexible working, and areas like that, to capture the strengths in the region where maybe that sort of connectivity with London is less important, because of working in situations like this. I think there are real opportunities there, and we'll you know, it'd be great to talk a little more about the sort of the regional opportunity. But from a national perspective, yes, I think government do need to set the frame, but business really need to step into it.
Yeah, and I suppose if you've got the grand challenge is articulated as key planks of the government's vision and strategy, and then all departments are challenged as to their decision making and how that hooks back to the delivery of that, then that would be more cohesive, and you know, business can obviously play a part. You know, it's interesting you talked about the southwest part of our regional footprint for Anstey, and it sometimes feels like the we talk about the great southwest, it sometimes feels like the forgotten southwest in some respects, lagging behind in terms of profile and business clout. You know, we don't have a south of Bristol anyway, there's no metro mayor or devolved authority. You know, what role is there for business to sort of make sure we do punch our weight? And you know, is it only devolution that can, you know, and a combined authority that can do that, or are there other mechanisms to achieve that?
It's going to be really interesting to see where the devolution of debate goes over the next year or so. I think, again, the pandemic has shown a lot of things. It's shown whether from Westminster through to devolved nations or whether through to regions, that things aren't always terribly well joined up. We've seen the debates, you know, we've seen the division, the tension between central control and local decision making happen. We've also seen some of the successes, where that works well, where the communication is really strong, where the centre sort of sets the framework, but actually regions are empowered to take decisions, whether in the pandemic, whether it's on test and trace, whether it's on restrictions, business support, where that's worked well. It's actually a really good model, and I think we can take some of that and apply that. So firstly, the government needs to refresh the devolution strategy. What powers are appropriate to devolve to regions, and importantly, what funding comes behind that? And again, expect to see more on that. one of the interesting things at the moment is you have a variety of models, as you've said. You have metro mayors in some places, you don't in others. You have almost 1,000 flowers blooming across the UK. That can work because you can learn a lot from it. What's really important is that no region is left behind, and we have seen some regions who are unable to reach regional agreement, actually hobbled because of that. Because it means they don't get the funding. It means they don't have the process in place to make decisions. So I think that's particularly true for the Southwest. It's, as with a lot of regions, it's very diverse. You know, you've got high productivity in Bristol, some of the lowest in the country in Cornwall. You've got, you know, the COVID impact on tourism, the skills challenge in the region. Again, very, very mixed across different parts. And I think probably the single most important thing, and where business can be really, really helpful, is starting to join stuff up. So, you know, can you have the Great Southwest working with the Western Gateway? Can you have LEPs, the Mayoral Combined Authority, actually coming together in a more effective way? And saying, no, we are a region, we succeed together or we fail together. There are benefits to scale, yet despite the diversity, despite the different dynamics in Bristol and Bath through to Cornwall, and you know, and there are of course different dynamics, but that needn't be a barrier. And I think the business, so much of devolution is about spreading equality of income, of prosperity, of opportunity, and that's what business do. So the business voice on that has got to be really, really strong. So let's do that. Let's build that, as I've said, on some of the changes we've seen in the pandemic, and we are seeing firms. The regional growth report that we did a few years ago showed that at that time, journey time to work was fundamental for regional productivity. If you were within an hour's journey, if you had a suitable workforce within an hour of your office or workplace, you would be more productive. That's going to change now because of flexible working. That's a huge advantage to areas like the Southwest. You've got, as we've said, the big government strategies, whether it's on net zero, whether it's on digital connectivity, whether it's on skills coming through. How can the Southwest step into that together, really grasp that and get ahead of other regions? And I think, you know, at the CBI, we're really pushing for a lot of support and investment in innovation, whether that's regional catapult quarters, whether that's investment roadmaps, vouchers for SMEs that actually help them to invest in productive technologies. If we can get those things right, and if the Southwest can come together and really exploit them, things are going to be different. Those first movers, those people with that ambition and that vision, are going to be able to take advantage. Let's make sure it happens here.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So we for Anstey, we've got a real focus on clean growth and mobility, which are obviously that aligns to national and indeed local industrial strategy thinking, and it strikes us that actually, you know, if we can hook some initiatives into delivery of local and national industrial strategy by cross private and public sector collaboration, irrespective of whether they fall under the West of England Combined Authority or plus a party that's in Cornwall, if we can draw those initiatives together and we can actually drive it from beneath, and just say, look, you know, we can contribute to the battery production through the lithium mining opportunities, and some technologies that we can support, and here's how we can position ourselves to be part of solving the grand challenge. Give us some money or some investment or some. So that seems to me a way of, you know, where we can sit and moan about, you know, feeling remote, or we can get and drive some action and activity.
And remoteness may not matter in the same way in the future as it does now. I remember one of the first conversations I had with Treasury after joining the CBI, where I was asking them, so just help me understand why you think mayors are a good thing. And the answer was very clear. Basically, the Treasury are pitched to for money. And what mayors are very good at generally is pitching, because they are a single voice that actually brings together the thoughts of their region, contextualizes that in ways that actually play to the government agenda, and they make it much easier to say, okay, I think I can invest in that. Whereas more fragmented, and it doesn't have to be a mayor, but a single voice is helpful. A more fragmented region, they were saying, actually what you get is 50 different calls. And for me, as a client trying to allocate my funds, that makes it really hard.
Yeah.
I think that importance of unity, that importance of vision, and tying it into, we hope, the industrial strategy is really, really important.
And I think it's very clear that how business can play a part in driving that agenda. So that's very encouraging, and we shall go off and play our part in doing that in the South West. So thank you, Josh. Thanks for your time. Very
Absolute
insightful
pleasure.
as ever.
Really nice to see you.
Cheers.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.